everyone, and I want to welcome you to Business Over Brand Digital Summit, hosted by your Creative Affairs Office. I am Kenesha Range, Chief of Internal Affairs of the DC Creative Affairs Office, and if you want to know more about our office, please visit creativeaffairsdc.com. So again, thank you for joining the conversation today, and I'm excited to get to introduce our two awesome guests. We have Randy Shurtko and Avik Ray. Randy, how about you tell us about yourself a little bit before we get started?
Sure. And thanks for having me. I'm really excited to participate in the conversation we're having today. I've actually best known for writing multiple books in the music industry. The one that's really well known is the Indie Band Survival Guide and Making Money with Music, which is very relevant to the conversation we're having today. I've actually spent the last about 6 or 7 years just intensely researching how musicians make money with music. And that's really been a big focus. I end up doing a lot of talks and consulting with musicians to really help them make more money. My own background, really briefly, I'm a musician. Our band has released 20 albums and over 500 songs. And one year we released one song every single day for a year, our Song of the Day project. So that was a lot of fun. And I've licensed music to Disney, Viacom, and others. So I've really participated in other parts of the industry. And one of the reasons why we became authors to talk about what we did as a band is that we realized that the information to do it yourself wasn't really easily available. And that's the kind of stuff that we put out there to really help musicians do that. So looking forward to talking with everybody today about these topics.
That is so cool. I can't wait to hear more about it. Congratulations to you and all your accomplishments. So we'll dive into that in a second. So Avik, how about you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, hey there, Kenesha. Very nice to meet you, and thanks for having me here today. Excited to have this conversation with you and with Randy. I'm a filmmaker based in Washington, D.C. As you can tell from the accent, I'm not from here. I'm from the U.K., but found myself here and made D.C. my home. I'm also the co-founder of a project called Crossover TV. And what that is it's effectively a YouTube channel where we take musicians from different backgrounds, bring them together, and see what happens when we try and get them to create songs together or perform together. So that's a very short summary of a little bit about me.
Okay. I've heard about Crossover TV. I know we've with the Mayor's Arts Project, we've done great work with you guys, and so I can't wait to talk to you more about that as well. So how about we dive in? You gentlemen ready?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, let's do it. Can't wait.
Let's do it. So Randy, you're a musician and you've worked with hundreds of musicians and teaching them how to make money with music. So how did you get started doing this work?
Well, sometimes you're leaning against a wall and it turns out to be a door. And it doesn't just turn out to be a door. It turns out to be that door in the Matrix where there's like a hallway with all these other doors and you never expected to be there. That's kind of what happened to us, because what we had been doing up to that point was just playing around live in Chicago, which is where we're based. And as I said, licensing music and actually just doing normal activities, really doing a lot of deep research on how we manage ourselves. We weren't looking to get signed. We started in 1997, by the way, so quite a long time ago. And in the early 2000s, we started to realize that there was a real lack of information out there on how to do it yourself. So we put out a free guide. It was a PDF. It was 101 pages, 50,000 words. We had it professionally edited. We gave it away for free on the internet. And then we moved on to our next project, which was the Song of the Day project after that. So we were doing that. Next thing we knew, Billboard magazine ended up writing an article about it, to our surprise. And then the Associated Press picked it up. And the next thing we knew, basically a major publisher picked it up and asked us to turn it into a full-fledged book with a major publisher, distribution, and all the rest. And even though we're independent when it came to music, fiercely independent, as NPR called us, I think at one point, I thought that was kind of funny. When it came to the book, we actually just wanted to get the information out there and to as many heads as possible. And as I talked about during the intro, we've spent the last 6 or 7 years intensely researching how musicians make money with music, because we ended up speaking a lot in front of Grammy chapters, in front of music cities, all kinds of things. And that was the question we got most often, unsurprisingly. We've since cataloged over 300 sources of income that musicians have. I think the current count, I always like to say the current count when I'm on these talks, I think is at 316.
Okay.
And the key thing that musicians should know is that no one's going to do all of them, but there's a good 20 or so, maybe 30 that musicians can participate in all at the same time. If you're just willing to spend a little bit of time to register your music, to actually do and participate in some of these sources of income, all while you're out there and really pleasing fans and giving them the kind of entertainment and things that they need. And as we all know, we've had a rough year in the past year. Music is one of the things that really carries us through. So our goal, me and my co-author, who couldn't be here on this one, is to help musicians bring more music into the world. And that's how we try and achieve that.
I love that. I love that. Music really does. It shifts your mood. It really helps you in whatever you're going through. So I am excited about your work. And later on in the conversation, we'll dive in more about those different streams and all of that, because I'm sure people want to know, musicians want to know, what are some great ways that they can do that. So
yeah, happy to talk about it.
Great. Thank you. What do you feel like, Randy, are some of the most common barriers that musicians may face when it comes to monetizing their work?
I think that there's a couple of them, and both of them are pretty simple to get around. And surprisingly, if they just turn their heads towards working on this. The first one is psychological. And that is that a lot of musicians don't like to take on the responsibility of basically being their own manager. They're like, well, the art is separate than the money and everything related to the business side of things. When the truth is, I understand why that's the case. I mean, there's been studies done that if you start thinking of numbers, you start thinking of the things on the business side, the logical side, it actually kind of suppresses the creative side. Your creative side works sort of like a car with the parking brake on if you actually get into that mode. And so unsurprisingly, a lot of musicians want to be expressive and everything. The truth is, if you kind of rethink things, you can use that same creativity that you use with your music to actually make the business part of it successful. And if you can find the parts that you actually have to be sitting there registering your music for royalties, for example, to just a weekend or two, you can actually make a lifetime of royalties off of it if you do that. The other barrier, besides the psychological one, this is really brief, is that they just don't know. And we didn't know when we started either, which is why we ended up writing the books that we do. And if you turn to any page in our book, it acts like a how-to step-by-step guide. And it's like, oh, you want to do this? Here's how you do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like a recipe. When at the other end, you'll have it. And the nice thing is, these are not recipes you have to memorize. You just have to do them once. And a lot of them, as I said, are good for your entire lifetime, interestingly. Some of them are ones you have to repeat, but you just make it part of like your shows and everything, and you'll actually start increasing the amount of money you can make. And we can get into that later if you'd like.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. That was actually my next question was, what are some ways that the creatives can overcome those barriers? So those are some great tips. Did you have more that you wanted to share?
About overcoming those barriers? Yeah, I mean, the first thing is, as stated, you need to get past this idea that you can't manage your own thing or that it's too hard to do. You actually just need the right information, which, like I said, that's what we've tried to do, is to make it so straightforward. By the time you're done with step 5, you've got what you need. And so it actually is worth it for you to do just a little bit of research and get out there. That's what we try and do with our book, in case you're wondering a good place to start. I'm not here just to sell a book. I really am a musician. I'm not just doing this to pitch things. It's actually what I really want to make sure people do is to get the information, which is why we speak so much, and mostly for free organizations, so that everybody can get a hold of the information and do what's necessary.
Got it. Got it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, Avic, I didn't forget about you. I am so excited to learn more about how Crossover TV got started. So can you tell us about how you got started in there in crossover TV, and what are some of your goals that have been in growing the platform?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of how it started, is obviously starts as a, like most things in my life, as an idea, as a passion thing. And as I mentioned at the start, I'm a filmmaker. So I was actually testing out some new gear. I wanted to test out a Steadicam. So these sort of like really cool movements, and try and experiment things. And I always loved the format of music videos. And for me, it's just this art form which I find very beautiful in terms of just very intriguing way to tell stories through not only through the lyrics of songs, but how you tell that visually. And so I started connecting with some local bands. I just arrived in DC actually, so I didn't know too many people, but I managed to get connected in with some musicians. I met a band called the Virginia Southpaws, who are now called the Creaky Bones, and met a guy in the band there called Rich, who was the lead guitarist. He turned out not only to be a fantastic musician, but also to be a great technician in terms of the music side. And
Nice.
so, well, this format of, kind of doing these music videos, which are, I don't want to say low tech, but, certainly not the big production side in terms of, having huge crews and everything. It was just me that was out there filming with him, and he captured the audio. And we said, well, what if we kind of experimented a little bit more with this idea? And we got talking, and then I started meeting more musicians, but from different backgrounds. I met a soul singer, a lady called Deja Bell, when I was actually at Mount Pleasant Library here. So it was a really random meeting, but I just find these random encounters are sometimes the things that have the most impact in your life. So I met Deja, I met Rich. We had these conversations around music. What could we do together? And then, this whole idea of bringing people together from different musical backgrounds, and then just kind of seeing what comes out of that. What would we do? People who you wouldn't necessarily normally cross paths with, perhaps in terms of your day-to-day life. And I just found this really fascinating as an idea. And it grew from there. We started doing the first episodes. We recorded at Seven Drum City. We got some recording space there, some studio space there. Rich set up the audio. I set up some cameras. And we just started producing our first music videos. We put them up on YouTube as our sort of medium of distribution, and just started growing the audience from there. And in terms of objectives, that's really how it started. Is like, what could we do with this in terms of, without going out with a specific goal? I'm trying to do this. That audience is important. What could we do to build an audience? What's interesting for people? And to a certain extent, we're still figuring that out. We're doing things which bring us enjoyment, which I think is honestly the number one goal for us. Is what do we get out of it in terms of that sort of I guess more spiritual aspect in terms of doing something creative, but also just this whole idea of building this community of people that want to see what happens if you cross paths with someone who you might not normally get to meet. You do something creative, you produce something together, and just see what comes out of it from there. But that's essentially where we are. Where we want to go to next is, yes, money is starting to become a question that we're going to have to start considering more now. We're still a relatively young channel, I would say. But it does become an issue, certainly on YouTube, when you cross over 1,000 subscribers and you get into the whole space of advertising. And you see the power of what money can do in terms of when you have it in the creative space. It means you can do more. If we can start paying artists and start paying other people to help us with the production side of the audio and the video, then we can produce more content and keep building this movement of bringing people together from different backgrounds to do something creative.
Right. It sounds like the perfect conversation to be having right now.
Well, I'm looking to benefit from Randy, to be honest.
Yeah.
In terms of the wealth of experience that he has, I'm certainly looking to learn.
Absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit about you shared about how you guys got started. Tell us about the artists who participate and what their experience has actually been like doing this.
Sure. I mean, many of the artists that we work with are local, so they're DC and DMV based artists. So I find DC, just music history wise, is just phenomenal. You've got obviously the whole go-go scene, but you've also got this whole punk scene that took place as well. And they're very diverse, and you've got lots of different communities and lots of different things going on. You've got the whole soul scene as well. You've got jazz. You've got so many different aspects of music taking place in this one city. And we have such rich pickings in terms of the talent that's here, in terms of just the artists that we're able to work with, it always blows my mind when we just go, okay, right, we're just going to bring together, I don't know, a hip hop artist with a folk singer, and we're going to bring together a classical artist with, I don't know, a rock band. We're going to bring together a pop singer, and there's just so much of that in terms of that openness and the willingness to try something different and to try something new in this city particularly. But the whole idea is that we can, the pandemic rather has shown us that we can actually work with people anywhere. We're not geographically constrained now, in terms of before we used to film in person and film locally, which is still a strong focus for us. We're very much community based in terms of we want to do things for our community here first, and then start seeing what we can do when we bring in other people. And one thing that's been nice is, as we've started to gain more traction, we've been able to, every now and again bring in a couple of, well-known artists as well. So we've had people from Sister Hazel, who were big in the 90s in terms of, coming onto our show, and also many others as well. So it's been really interesting to see what other artists come in and how they interact with artists that are still independent, and to see how everything plays out.
You mentioned it a little bit ago about, monetizing crossover TV. Do you have any ideas about how do you think money will play a role in the future of crossover?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on it a little bit. I think it just, more than anything, I want it to allow us to do more of what we're doing. I mean, in terms of money, in terms of lining pockets and paying the bills, it's not really, I don't think that's where certainly not where my head is at in terms of this. I think what I'm looking at is how can we, certainly in terms of the next steps of what money could do for our channel, is, we could do more of it. We could do more great things. We could make more connections happen. We could get more great music out into the world. We could create more friendships that haven't happened yet, and for me, that's just like, that's the exciting part of this, in terms of what money can do for us, in terms of when we start crossing those hurdles. From going to doing, one a week or one a month, to doing 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, in terms of making more and more interactions happen and getting more and more sort of creative projects out there. I think that's really the game for us, is could we do more of what we're doing? And I think money definitely helps with that.
Right. So the common thread that I'm seeing between both of you, Randy and Avik, is that when you're just starting with your channel's pretty new, but Randy, you've been doing all of this work as well for a long time. You say you started in 1997, but even at your genesis, you did it for free. And you did it because you loved it. And I remember, I think it was an old quote Oprah said, if you do, you really love something, you're passionate about it, if you're willing to put the work in and do it for free initially. And don't worry about that. Like it's the money's coming. It will be, all of the things will be provided for. So that's the common thread that I'm hearing between the two of you. And I'm also interested in both of you actually now sharing about the complicated relationship between money and music, and how it can impact creativity in a way. And so either one of you can share on that topic first.
Randy, you want to take that one on the music side first, and then I'll talk to it from a film side in terms of the creative aspect. But Randy,
no, great idea, and happy to do that. There was a interesting thing that happened in the music in last century. Interestingly, I guess we could say that, considering that there was a certain music movement where the money in the music actually got sort of exposed to the fans, and the fans actually cared whether their musicians were making money using sponsorships, or using it to endorse something, or anything along those lines. And it really came very much out of the rock movement and things like that. Interestingly, that's mostly fallen away. Fans don't really care very much. In fact, they're happy when their musicians are actually finding ways to get more popular, and as far as what they're making money off of, it's really not seen that negatively. Now, there's a question of authenticity that comes up very often. That's something that gets talked about. We address this very early on in our book, because it's not only important in terms of basically representing yourself to your fans, but keeping in mind the fact that nobody knows you as a person. I mean, a person is a very complicated thing. They're a whole world unto themselves. Your persona, which is what we like to call something that's larger than a brand, is an idea that people carry around in their heads of what you are. And it's up to you to maintain that and decide what that persona is. You can actually control that. You can set up how people see you. You can set up the images that you use to represent yourself, the words you use to represent yourself, how you dress. All these things come together. And if you don't control it, interestingly, your fans will do it for you. They'll want to talk about you. If you didn't put out a single image, they use it. They'll carve out pieces of your website. That's what they used to do with us before we learned to kind of represent ourselves more easily about this kind of thing. And the reason I mentioned persona is because some personas are not really in line with doing endorsements, and some of them have nothing to do with it, and it's fine. You could do whatever you want. So when we're saying be authentic, it's partly you do want to create a persona that's authentic to your personality and something that you agree with. You obviously don't want to do something that doesn't fit. I talked to one artist who talked about not signing with a label and going on his own. And then when he talked to the label, get this, he was in a room. This was in the early 2000s. So labels were way more of a thing. It was way harder to do things on your own at that point. And he was at some kind of gathering where there's all these label people. It's like, okay, go stand in a corner, they told him, and act mopey and sulky. And if you ever met this guy, that is not his personality. That has nothing to do with him, but they wanted to paint him as this kind of personality so that they could sell him to people who would pick him up and then take it from there. Look, you should never do that. You really need to be authentic to yourself. And part of it is if you define your persona in a way that you're comfortable endorsing things, that you're comfortable getting sponsorships, and actually there's social media. Some people love doing social media. Some people hate it. Actually, all of these things can actually represent income streams. And if it helps, and this does help people, here's my practical piece of advice on the persona, is you have to take a little bit of separation between who you are and who somebody managing you would be. And if you were thinking, I'm managing an artist like me, how are the ways that I can make an income off of this? That's my job. I'm not doing my job if I'm not making an income off of all the different methods available to me. As I mentioned a few: endorsements, sponsorships, social media. You can actually get paid to just like a page if you have enough followers. And that could be $10,000 or more per like. But that's when you hit millions of likes. All of these can come together nicely. Sometimes those don't work. There's other ways to make money if that is cut off. It's okay. But this complicated relationship actually starts from something that you actually were almost touching on with Oprah. It's like, who are you? Who do you want to be? Who do you want to represent yourself to be? And if you can actually represent yourself in a way, this is another piece of advice, that somebody can find themselves inside of what you're presenting. They find a relationship that they feel comfortable with, that they really enjoy. That's where all of these other income streams flow from it. That's where they will reward you for you giving them entertainment and a part of their identity that they like to emphasize for themselves. And I know that this is a lot of words around something that's a very complicated topic, but hopefully it makes a little bit of sense, in that it does come from authenticity is all at the heart of what I'm talking about here.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Avik, I would love to hear about it from, like you said, your film perspective, and how do you think money, bringing it into the conversation, impacts maybe the creative process?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the important thing for me is, if you're doing this as a full-time thing, you have to get money in the door, you have to pay the bills, you have to pay the rent, you have to put food on the table. So if you're doing it like that, which I've done with filmmaking, I took a step, just as a bit of context, I took a step where I had let's say, call it a regular job in terms of working in finance, which I quit to become a filmmaker. So I wanted to pursue my passion and try and do that. And there's a complete shift in terms of something I'd never done before, nothing I'd been sort of formally trained in. I learned as I went and just had a passion for doing this. And when you're out there and you're trying to, you realize the reality of, it's difficult to go out and bring cash through the door. You maybe don't take necessarily the optimal decision in terms of becoming the best filmmaker, let's say, for example, or the best person in your creative film, because you'll take on assignments, or I did it rather, in terms of, let's call it, in terms of how failure happens, or the lessons that you learn of, you take on assignments that maybe don't take you in the direction that you want to be going, but you're doing things to meet your immediate needs. And I certainly suffered from that when I was started out as a filmmaker. I was taking on assignments either that were priced too low, that were not reflective of the time that I was putting in, because I learned that later in terms of, it's the unit that I was selling to people was units of my time, units of my creativity, let's say, and I was not charging those correctly, and right. And not doing the right kind of jobs. So I just found that in terms of that whole money creativity aspect, I wasn't able to unleash the full power of my creativity because I was so concerned, let's say, about making the immediate things happen. So that's just the only thing I can really comment on towards the sort of the creativity money aspect, is that sometimes when you have this pressure, sometimes people really thrive in it, sometimes people don't. And I think there's certain decisions that you can make that you have to be probably very focused on what it is that you're looking to do and try and make the right decisions. But
I love that. So you both kind of touched on authenticity in a way, and with money, bringing it into your process of your each of your respective businesses. And so with authenticity, it comes the idea of selling out, quote unquote, to make a buck or two. So where do you guys even think that comes from, and how does one manage that? I think, Randy, you talked about it a little bit with your persona, but can you both, maybe Avik, you can start first and just let us know about, what is that? Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to what I was saying, is that you have choices to make depending on your situation. If you've made it, if you've hit it out the park straight out the bat, you've written a great song, it's getting recognized, it's been playing on the radio, you probably don't have that problem because you can stay very true to that because you've been recognized straight away. For probably 99.9% of the musicians out there, that's not the case. People don't make it hit it straight out the park on the first attempt. There's a lot of work that goes into becoming a successful musician or a successful artist of whichever description, whichever field you're working in. But I just feel this whole aspect of trying to find that balance in terms of who you are and who you want to be and who you want to project to the outside world, and that trade-off that you've got with making ends meet is very difficult. And this is why I think this conversation with Randy is really great, because it helps. I'm hoping it's going to, in terms of Randy's books and Randy's advice, what it gives you is these tools that allow you to say, okay, if you've created something great, you've got different ways of creating income streams while you're still building yourself up. And I think that that's a really powerful set of skills that an artist can learn to help them on this journey, if that's the chosen path in terms of becoming a creator or a creative or an artist or a musician in terms of lifestyle choice, let's say.
Okay. Randy?
I'll add to what I was saying before. Besides defining yourself and your persona and how you want to represent yourself, because, by the way, you can be a musician and not have a fan base and make a living at it. And you do it by doing the kinds of things that Avik was working on, which is to sell business to business type of things. You can license music. You can even play live and not have a fan base by becoming like a stage musician, where you're playing with or touring with a band, and it's the band or artist that's already has the fan base, and you're just playing music. So to be clear, music doesn't necessarily mean that that you actually need to develop it. But when you develop a fan base, if that's what you decide to do, the thing to know is who the fans are. You really should understand as much as possible who it is that likes your music. And if you're just starting out, because we commonly get the questions, not from the people in the audiences that we speak to who have an audience because they tend to know them pretty well, but okay, I'm starting out. Who are my audiences? it actually starts as the next stage past what we just talked about, which is once you know who you are and how you want to represent yourself, then you actually find your audience. That's what your music is. And don't think your music has to be good. I often use an example of NPR had a show called The Annoying Music Show, and it was on for a long time. It's the most annoying music you've ever heard in your life. I mean, things being played with kazoos and accordions and, you know, all kinds of stuff you wouldn't believe. And they had multiple compilation albums. So the question is, can your music find its audience? Who are they? You have to put yourself out there to find them. And where should you go at first? Start with who you are. Once you know yourself very well, like where do you spend time online? Try and get your music in front of the people who are like you. And that is make a message that you would react well to. You're your first audience, basically. Now, once you have all of that and you know who your audience are pretty well, then you will actually have a pretty good feel about what they like in terms of what they'll spend money on, what they like to reward. We like to carve out the fan base a bit to really satisfy all of them between something that the video gaming industry actually did a good job of defining out. They call them minnows, dolphins, and whales. Mm-hmm. And minnows are ones that are going to pay a few bucks for things because they like it. The dolphins are sort of like in the music space, they buy a t-shirt and a poster or so, or a hat. And your whales are the ones who are going to spend $200 or $300 for like a souvenir item that's signed and customized and one of a kind. What you'll find is that your income primarily comes from the whales, 50 to 80% of your income. And most musicians make a mistake of when they make a set of merch, they'll only have like minnow merch or they'll have, you know, maybe some dolphin merch, and they won't have anything to satisfy the people who are going to pay the most. And when I say satisfy, I mean, you are providing a service to people. If it gets in your way that you're trying to make more money, think of it the other way around. These people love what you do and they want to reward you and they want to be a part of it and they want even to buy pieces of it. Like when you're on stage and you're done, you literally can sell items that you played on stage with, like guitar strings even. I mean, they want even the set list. It's crazy. You sign a set list and it's worth something to them because it's actually a memento from an experience that you shared and gave them. Hopefully all of this comes together nicely to be clear that when you think this way, you can actually successfully give something to people that they treasure. And all this is completely authentic. And as you started talking about authenticity, all of this flows directly out of what you are doing, which is to provide, as I talked about at the very intro, something that people desperately need right now when they're going through tough times in their life. Music is a really big part of what makes them whole and gets them through the day. So all of this comes together nicely, and it does not have to be, let's say, a capitalistic only type of way to think about things. Hopefully I've answered your question in that long monologue. So
yes, you did. Thank you so much. I think that's very helpful because I agree 1,000%. Like I would absolutely buy Beyonce's set list if she signs it.
There you go.
If she didn't sign it, I'm buying it. So
yeah.
You can monetize off of anything if you're an artist, and right. You just sell yourself, and that's not sell yourself, but
No. Yeah.
So as we wrap up, you both have touched on this topic throughout this conversation. Mm-hmm. But I would love it if you would quickly tell me, how important is it for you as an artist or someone as a filmmaker or whatever respective genre that they're in to create multiple streams of income? We touched on the different forms and ways we could do that, but how important is it for someone to have multiple streams?
Did you want me to start or? Yeah. The research that I did, including interviewing a lot of musicians who are doing it themselves. And what I can tell you from all of the musicians that I talk to, there aren't any successful musicians who just have one or two streams of income. They all have multiple streams of income. And it comes from multiple large areas. I think I've categorized it in about 15 different categories. I think I talk about it at the beginning of the book and in free articles that I've written and talked about everywhere. At a high level, you can think of it in terms of the fact that you've got music and royalties and licensing are a really big set. And most musicians don't sign up for that. And I actually, just to give you an idea how much this can be worth, when you sign up for royalties, you sign up once, you get royalties for the rest of your life, plus another 70 years after that, which you might think, well, I don't care about the 70 years after that. And you actually might, because you can actually sell off those rights. So if you're actually establishing a good income stream, you can get money from after you were gone, bring it to now and have real money to spend now. There's markets for this kind of thing. It's really something, especially because your top fans actually may want a piece of a song that they love and want even just 50% of it. There's royalties, there's licensing, there's the things you can do while playing live. There's, of course, merchandise as a high level item. And there's many others. And here's the thing about all the things that I just said. For the most part, almost none of them interfere with each other. They actually only help each other for the most part. If you get your music licensed and you get it in a TV show, then you can get some publicity, which can get you some more fans, which gets you more people buying more merch. And none of them care about the fact that any of these things, which interlock beautifully, they come together. There's a handful that may not work together, but there's very few. Of the 316 I have, there's very few that ever interfere with each other. The main thing that you find is a real limitation is your money, time, and energy. You only have so much of each. Your time is actually usually more limited than you would think, even the money, because one of the things that we talk about in our book is how to start a music business for $0. You can get your music distributed for free. You can get your music made for free. There's lots of options for most of this stuff. And so what does all of this mean? It means that if you come together and do it the right way, you just need the knowledge to sign up for these royalties, to activate, for example, things like the social media income streams that you can do. Affiliate programs, which if you haven't heard of, is something that you just provide links to people. And when they buy stuff that you link to, that you make a bit of income off of it, and all of these things and bring it together. So it's usually, like I said, it's the knowledge that's usually the gap that people have. Once you have it, you follow the steps, and most of them are ready to go and will start adding extra sources. The final piece to this, there's one final piece to this that's key. I want to make sure to share this with musicians, which is that since you have a limited amount of money, time, and energy, you want to make little bets on things. You want to try all kinds of stuff. Drop the things that don't work very quickly, but don't be like, okay, I'm going to go on one big tour and then everything comes together for that and it falls apart. Then it's not going to work. Find ways to, okay, I can do like a streaming show and see if that picks up people. Try things that are really straightforward and easy and within your reach. The thing that will work is not something you would guess that you're thinking of. It's the world that will tell you what's working. And therefore, an idea is worth just a tiny bit of this, but an idea that you've tried in the world is worth a lot. These experiments, these small little bets that you can think of them as, do not have failure or success results. They have just results. They have a result, and you will learn something from them. Sometimes you'll do something and it didn't work the way you expected to, and you'll twist it, and next thing you know, you're doing something you never expected. That is the most important message, one of the most important messages I can pass on, because every single musician I talk to had something along those lines and are doing things they never expected and are making a lot of money from it.
Great. Yeah, that's so key. That's so key. Thank you. Avik, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of touches a little on what Randy was saying. I mean, this whole idea of diversification of income streams, I think, is really important. If you're ever too dependent on one source and all of a sudden it doesn't work or it stops for whatever reason, there's changes that I don't know in YouTube's ad policies or something else, I think it's always a risk that you take if you're over reliant on a single source of income. So if you're able to diversify in whichever way you can, I think that's always a a sensible plan in terms of just life generally. And then, touching again on that idea of that thing that you try that Randy was talking about, if you're able to sort of build a base, let's say level of income from whatever it is you're doing, even if it's contracting, whatever it is, you've got a base level that you're happy with things that work. Don't be afraid to try those other things, which might be the one that really, hits the jackpot, in terms of those new ideas that you throw out there, trying something that's different, trying something that, it might or might not work, but just keep trying those other little ideas and keep experimenting, keep inventing, and keep creating. And I think that's the important thing that I would say is that, diversification and not being afraid to try new ideas that might work.
Yes, I love that. Thank you both so much. This conversation has been dynamic. I'm pretty sure that the people listening out there are just taking notes, and they're going to rewind and get all the good tips and tricks and all that good knowledge that you guys shared with us today. So again, thank you both so very, very much. Do either of you have any quick takeaways for the audience before we head out? Maybe Avik?
Takeaways. I really loved this idea that Randy was talking about the whale, in terms of we all think like that. We all think about, okay, what's the small thing that we can do in volume, but what about that big thing that you can do in smaller volume that might be the thing that actually makes the difference? And that whole idea of 80-20 in terms of Pareto and all that sort of stuff, I think it's really interesting, and to apply that to the creative field, I think is also a really great idea. So I mean, certainly for me as a learning point, I took that from Randy, and I think that's the thing that has stuck from this discussion today.
Yes, thank you. Randy?
Thanks, Avik. I've learned a lot from what you've talked about in your journey as well. I mean, you've created a community of musicians, which is, I think, one of the most powerful things that I've ever seen as I've been out there, traveled around the country and spoke. It's amazing to me what musicians are doing together. I think that, besides that key point of just trying things, that making little bets, as it were, or trying little experiments, you actually have to do one step before that, which is to take on the responsibility of the management part of the music business that you have. It's a step that a lot of people skip because, as I said before, that psychological barrier. And then secondly, I don't know what to do. And when you don't know what to start, that's the number one thing that paralyzes people. It paralyzes me when I don't know what to do. And that little bit of research, and that's why I wrote the book that I did. It's like, here's where to start. You need to know where to start on these things. There is a way to learn this stuff. You can do it. You have the power to do it. And not only that, but most of these methods to make money with not just music, but make money with creativity, let's say, whatever your creative output is well within your reach. And most of them don't take long to do. You can segment the time you're doing that, the business part compared to the part where you're out there in front of fans or you're working on your music, so that it doesn't interfere. And so it starts by actually knowing that you're not only empowered to do it, but the knowledge to do it is well within your reach. Once you take that on, you'll find this growing, and you'll actually really appreciate things quite a bit more, because you'll be rewarded for all of your hard work, which it deserves. Music, as I said, the goal that Jason and I have is to bring more music into the world. Part of that is to get that reward. Part of that is to be well compensated for what you're providing for people. And once you take that on, I think you're going to find a lot more success than you think is possible.
I love that. You can do it. You have the power to do it. And the knowledge to do it is well within your reach. Those are some great takeaways. Like, I've learned a lot, and I'm not even a musician, but I'm taking this and putting it into my, respective genre of what things that I do. So thank you both for sharing so much. How can people find you all on social media? Randy?
The easiest place to find us is actually at the website, makingmoneywithmusic.com. And we have a newsletter on it that's actually free. And it just talks about just gives you ideas constantly on different ways to make money with music. Each one of them will actually open up those income streams. So if you're wondering about a place to start, it's a very good place to do it. And like I said, totally free. We also have an immediately downloadable book with a ton of ideas in it, including those categories of ways to make money with music if you want ideas.
Okay, thank you. Avic, how can we find you on your socials?
Yeah, sure. So if you visit thecrossover.tv, it will take you to our YouTube page. Please join our community. Hit subscribe, also free, helps us on our journey. And yeah, we would love to keep sharing music with all of you, all the things that we're doing. And we'd love for everyone who's watching this to be part of that community as well as we move forward.
Yes, I'm an avid YouTuber. So yes, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all that good stuff.
All of that.
Well, thank you both, Randy and Avic, for being here, for joining us for this conversation on money and creativity and all that great stuff. And for all you people out there listening and watching, thank you all so much for watching. And I hope to see you again in another session throughout this Business Over Brand Summit. So have a great day, everyone. And thank you.
I think because this is a cohesive song about moving towards the greater good in the district and the world, I'm like, oh, we should probably be a little bit intentional.
Yeah, it's really is a fusion. I think that's the message. I think that's the idea, is just kind of like bringing all of our own takes to it. So I don't think we have to necessarily model it after anything. It's just us. It's like whatever we bring to it. So whatever the song kind of, forms into, that's totally cool.
Mostrar amor el uno al otro en el alma.
Son de risas y de llantos, se han apagado sin dejar ya ni rastro. La vida en pausa y uno sin saber mañana lo que viene o lo que va a suceder. En este día que viene y que va, lo importante es respirar y adelante. Y a mi familia, la gente que quiero, esté libre ya de toda enfermedad. Y que el abrazo se vuelva a dar, una fiesta, un asado, reunión familiar. En unidad, sororidad, respetando la vida y la diversidad. Sé que todo estará bien. Acompáñame, amigo, pongámonos en pie. Sé que todo estará bien. Mientras estemos unidos, no nos podrán detener.
I see the people rising from a long winter sleep. I can hear their voices calling, they just wanna breathe. There's a wind going northward, guided by the same star. The only way is forward to decide who we are. It's gonna be fine, todo estará bien. Mi voz es el brazo que hoy te puedo dar. It's gonna be fine, todo estará bien. Our voices, they unite us, we will sing again. Oh, 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 oh. Imagine a world where everyone sings in their own voice. We have to respect our uniqueness. Go beyond the flesh, find the spirit and the soul. Word, it might be a long road, cause the hate fills up like lymph nodes. That's how the world can get so ice cold, when we scared to see the unknown. But the future has us too flowed, if we let go of that old mode. Need no battle of the Alamo, cause war be that rabbit hole. I just wanna keep us whole, to respect the individual. Love humanity, it's simple. Love humanity, it's simple. Love humanity, it's simple.